Hello, welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at components and how a component can store data for a sensor. And from the last episode, if you load up the game, you'll notice that Niblet's not there anymore. That's because we have a sensor that is not registered in the game. So let's hop in the code and do that. You actually look at the logs, you'll see that it will say builder tame does not exist. So that's because we haven't registered it in the plugin. So let's do that really quick and then continue. Also, I just returned true right here, just because this we're basically going to come back to this after we finish our component. So the component is going to store the data for whether or not the niblet is tame or not. And then in the sensor, we're going to use that data to trigger actions that are defined in the config. The action being setting the interactable to true. So if it's so anyway, let's go into the plugin and let's register our interaction or register our sensor, our builder sensor. So to do that, we're going to look at the example for how they did it here. And oh wait, that's the sensor. We need the builder. So we register the builder, we don't register the sensor. So it looks like they called register core component type. This dot register core component type. Okay, so it looks like it's going to be npc plugin get register core component type, and we're going to call this the tamed sensor. So we're just going to call it tamed. And that should fix that error. Let's rerun it and check. Oh wait, sorry, I wrote builder action team. I meant to write builder sensor team. So this keyword right here has to be the same as right here, by the way. That's what it's referring to. So if you don't have those the same, it's not gonna work. And let's see if we can get Niblet back in the world. Great, there's Niblet back at it again. We can see that there's nothing that's changed yet, mostly because we haven't finished the logic for the sensor, because we need the component. So let's go ahead and hop back into the code and start writing the component. So I kind of want to explain what this component is for and what components are just in general. Components store data. And for us, we need to store data on Niblet to be able to tell the sensor if it is tamed or not. So to do that, we're going to go in, create a new package, just call it components. I'm going to call this the tame component. So the tame component, I'm going to use my already written example just as reference, just because I don't remember exactly how to write this. But I'm going to try to explain it as I go. Okay, so it's going to implement component entity store. And again, don't want nullable. Well, it's a, I don't think we want nullable, but yeah, let's just delete that. So in the tame component, we want to store whether or not the niblet is tame. So let's make a variable for that. I'm going to default it to false. And then we need to make a codec. So codecs are a mechanism for serializing and deserializing data to and from a JSON file. They are basically how data is structured. It defines how data is structured. In Hytale, everything is kind of stored in a JSON file, and to be able to serialize and deserialize from that, you need a codec. So for that, let's just write it out. We need this codec for the isTame variable, by the way. That's what this is for. Because basically, like, how are you going to go from a variable that's just a boolean here into a JSON file? That's what codecs try to bridge the gap for, as far as I know. I'm also pretty new to all this, so if I say something that's just totally off base, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try to address it in the future. I just know that whenever you go into the files and you start reading through it, this is how you save data, and you need a codec to be able to tell the like what you're trying to save as a JSON file. Without the codec, there's no translation between this boolean variable here and the JSON file that it's going to create. So I'm going to create a new keyed codec. I'm going to call it isTamed. And it's going to be a type of boolean. this syntax is kind of hard to read, but to figure this out, you can just look at an example. Like, for example, if I opened up the component, like the transform component, it would have codec in there. And I could just copy the example over, which is exactly what I'm going to do right here. I'm just going to copy this over. I gotta waste time typing it out. So this variable is going to be called isTame, and so in the JSON file, it's going to actually say isTame on it. And then it's basically mapping that JSON file isTame variable to our isTame variable right here in the component. Cool. So next thing we need to do is fill out the clone method. And we need to have a get component type. So this get component type is actually used in a in our sensor to be able to get. So if I look at the sensor, to actually get the component from the sensor tamed, we need a. So if you look at this get component method, it takes in a component type to be able to get the actual component from the entity's entity store. So that's why we need this next part. It all makes sense in the end. And we're gonna actually just store this this component type in the plugin because we're gonna be using it in other places. So and we also need it for registering our component in the plugin. So we're gonna define this in the plugin. I'm gonna make it public and static, so that way we can get it. And then in the setup, we're gonna initialize it. Or we're gonna register it. Oh. Oh. So whenever we initialize it, we actually are going to tell it to use this codec that we define. Why is it angry? Hmm. Oh, that's why. It's component type right here. Okay. So, this is where the codec's getting used, by the way. Now that we have our components, now we can use it in the sensor. So in the sensor, after so let's get the component from the entity store. So let me try to explain this part really quick. The store that it's referencing right here is the store, the entity store. So the entity store right here is the store on the niblet. So we're getting the component from the niblet's entity store. At least I think that's what it is. So just to make sure that everything is actually, just to make sure that the component's actually on the niblet, we're gonna check to see if the tame component is null. If it is null, we're just gonna return false. And if it's not null, then it'll continue, and we're gonna check to see if the tame component is tame equals the sensors is tame. So it's angry because we don't have a getter for is tame. I think we can use Lombok for this. Let's check it out. Lombok just adds a getter or setter really easily without having to write any code. So I think that'll work. Right, so let's try it out actually. Okay, F to interact. And it's borked. Okay, so the reason why this isn't working is because the component, the tame component, is not actually on Niblet yet. To get Niblet to have the tame component on and we actually need to create something that's called a holder system, holder entity store. And to do that, we're going to use this reference called NPC reputation holder system. And we're going to use this as a reference for how to write a system. All this system is going to do is add the component, the tame component, to the proper entity whenever it is spawned in the world on entity add. So to do that, we're going to create a new class, call it tame system. And it's going to extend holder system entity store. And then it's going to have the tame component on it. So technically, I don't think we need to do this, but let's just follow their pattern and not change anything until after we get it working. Okay. So systems are basically the logic for so components are the data, systems are the logic, and entities are unique IDs. You kind of need all three whenever you're working on something, for the most part. But well, it depends on what you're working on. Honestly, you don't really need all of the three. But for ours, we need a system to be able to add the component to the proper entity. So now we're going to build the constructor that we're going to call from, I think we're going to call this from the plugin, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and then we have to set the query. So for us, we're going to make it a little bit different. We're going to have everything on have everything be tameable except for what was it? Except for mountable. And that'll just ensure that we don't have any NPCs that are mountable be able to be tameable, because then it'll like conflict with the F to interact kind of thing. I'm just gonna copy this over as well. Okay, and we need on entity. I think we just need on entity add. Oh, we need both. Okay. So I'm gonna copy it over from here. And I'm gonna copy this over as well. And I'm going to use the finished version of this as reference as well. Oh, okay, yeah. So we need to be able to get the NPC entity, so we do need this NPC entity component type as well as our tame component type. So I'm going to copy this over as well. And since we want to be able to query by roles to be able to set the component to only specific roles, we want to be able to make sure that the system is being created after the role builder system. So to do that, we need a dependency. And the dependency is going to say after the role builder system. So that's just going to say that the role builder system has to be finished or set up before the tame system is set up. And we also want our NPC component type. So this is basically saying anything that's an NPC and not a component or entity that has the mount component, those are what's valid for this system. And for this, we're going to just set tame component.get component type. Right. Okay. So Now we gotta define what's gonna happen on entity added. And the goal is to get the tame component added to anything with the role that we specify. So first we're going to do null check, make sure that the NPC entity is not null, because we can't add a component to a null entity. Then we want to see if it has a role assigned. And if it is not assigned, we want to log that. So I'm gonna grab the logger. You can add this logger anywhere, by the way, any class. Just throw it at the top and you can use the logger anywhere. We also want to check to see if the role is niblet. So this means that if the role is null or if the role name is not equal to niblet, then return and don't do anything. Next, we actually don't need this right now. Next, we're just going to add the tame component. So we can either add component like this, or we can ensure and get component, which adds it if it's there. And so what this one does is it will get the component if it's already exists, and if it doesn't already exist, it will add it to it and then get the component. The reason why I'm using this instead of just add component is because we're going to use the tame component to check for is tame in here, and we're going to do some logic with it after we get this working. So let's just rerun this and see if everything's good. Now remember, this is on entity added, so all entities that are spawned in before this are not going to have this component, so we have to spawn in Niblet again. Okay. And let's check the logs. Sensor failed to get tame component. Oh, we have to register the system. I don't think we did that. Yeah, the system's not registered. To register the system, we're going to look at this as an example, the NPC reputation holder system. And find usages and look at see how it was registered. So it was registered in the setup function. I'm just going to fact check that with the existing. Right, so this is one of the ones that was actually different than what the examples show. The reason why we are adding the tame system in the start method instead of the setup method, well, I'll just show you actually. So let's run this and see. See, it just I don't even think it prints out any errors, honestly. I don't know. Just trust me. I tried it out, it didn't work. And then let's try it out in the start method, and it should work just fine. So let's restart. Cool, and now it's working. Now, notice that the F to tame is not going away. Well, we actually aren't doing anything action right now. What we need to do is set the is tame variable to false in the component. So let's do that really quick. So in action tame, we want to get the tame component. entities reference. Okay, right, so we want to get tame component, and then we're going to set the isTame variable. Right now we just have an isTame getter, but we also want a setter, so I think we can use Longbach for this. I just want to use Longbach, that's all. And I think we can actually just replace this isTame with a getter as well. Not completely sure on that, but we'll check it out. Tame component set is tame to true. Okay. Now, I think there's something else that we need to change. I just deleted a piece of code. Yeah. Now these are two different types of booleans, so that might be a problem. One's the capital B boolean, the other's the lowercase b boolean. We'll check it out. Right, so I was missing a piece of code. Basically, if we don't have, I was missing this piece of code right here in the template niblet. Whenever you have interacted and you're not in the interaction state, then set interactable to false. Basically, nothing was setting the interactable to false, so it was still saying F to tame. But we have a check to set it to true here. We don't have it to set to false, except for up here. So we needed one more set to false whenever it's switching from interacting, when it's switching to the interaction state. We want it to switch the interaction state and set it to interactable false. So now with that, we can hit F to tame, and then that's it. One action spent, and that's all you can do. You cannot spam click tame to interact anymore. Right, so I think that's it for this video. Leave some comments if you have any questions.